What if the way you teach and care for young children could change the world? Welcome to Reimagine Childhood, brought to you by the Early Childhood Christian Network, helping you grow as an educator, leader, and follower of Jesus. Early childhood is a sacred season where hearts are shaped, faith begins to grow, and lifelong learning takes root. We believe teaching young children is more than a job, it's a calling. That's why each episode is filled with practical strategies, real stories, and faith-based encouragement to help you create joyful, meaningful learning experiences in your classroom and beyond. Let's reimagine what's possible in early childhood together. I'm your host, Monica Healer, and I'm so glad you're here.
You're going to be blown away by today's episode. You might even want to get a pen and some paper to take notes. Our guest is pediatric occupational therapist and founder of Skidmarink Kids, Kendra Worley. We're talking about sensory integration, developing motor skills, impulse control, tons of stuff related to the development of the right and left brains, and how we might be stifling one side or the other and missing the communication across the brain hemispheres. Don't worry, it's not totally a sciencey episode. Kendra and I provide really practical ideas for helping to support proper brain development with the children in your care. Get ready for another great episode to help you be your best in the classroom. Kendra, welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, we are talking today about some of the work that you're doing with young children and their families as an occupational therapist has really led you to notice some shifts in patterns and just some different things that you have noticed as you've worked with young children and families over the last couple of years. So tell us a little bit about what you're seeing, and then let's talk about what is God's design for brain development and what is actually happening today that's interrupting that.
Really good question. So let's start off in a typical patient would look like 30 years ago in a therapy clinic for a pediatric occupational therapist or a speech therapist. Typically, the caseload was more kiddos with cerebral palsy. And luckily, with advances in technology, that has really changed. Prenatal care has really changed that. But what we're seeing now is a lot more kiddos with signs and symptoms and later diagnosis of autism. ADHD is on the rise, high anxiety, kids with extreme behavioral problems.
Yeah.
So it's really changing. And the interesting thing is, even my friends that have kiddos that seem typically developing, really the norms are kind of changing. Kids are starting to talk later. They're starting to crawl later. They're having more meltdowns. Usually in a classroom before 30 years ago, a teacher may report, one or two kiddos on the spectrum or that had extreme behavior challenges. But I'm sure you're aware that now we're seeing classrooms full of kiddos with some type of difficulty with sensory issues, difficulty with regulation. And so through my research as an OT, but really as a mom who wanted to figure out what was going on with my kid and what was the root cause, I did a lot of research and stumbled on functional disconnect syndrome.
So talk a little bit about how you see God's design in brain development, and then let's talk about what's happening with this functional disconnect syndrome.
Okay, so Dr. Malalo is the one who came out with a book called Disconnect Kids. And in his book, he talks about there's a theory that dates way back how the brain and a lot of these kids where we see symptoms of either delay or social impacts, things like that, sensory issues, that really what's happening is the brain is getting off balance. So let's talk about what God's perfect design is. As we know, our God is a God of order, right?
Yeah.
He likes things in order. And so if you look at development, it's not random patterns. We see
No.
patterns, right? So kids
Yeah.
typically roll and then they start to sit up and they start to push up on their stomach and then they start to crawl, hopefully, and then they walk. It's not random.
Right.
And so as we see these patterns, then we know in the brain that there's patterns that are developing.
Right.
And so what happens is one side of the brain is supposed to develop first for the first 18 to 24 months. That's our right side of our brain. And then left side of our brain is supposed to start to develop. It doesn't mean that the right brain is finished, but it's supposed to lay the foundation. And then as that left side starts to take over, then the brain starts to do different things. But what's happening is our world is kind of triggering a lot of left brain activity in babies. And so they're not developing this really strong foundation. So what happens is you got this disconnect between the hemispheres. So one side of the brain is weaker than it should be, and that's your foundation. And then your other side of the brain is stronger and it plays big brother. Well, I'm stronger, so I'm going to take over. And this is
Mm.
why we see gaps in development, like a child that, is 2 or 3 years old that can line up ABCs in the perfect pattern, but can't look at you and ask for a cookie or be
Ooh,
aware when someone comes in the room. So it explains, I love this theory because it kind of explains the gaps in development that we're seeing.
yeah. Yeah.
And so what happens is when you have this disconnect, the brain, the hemispheres aren't talking to each other. So you have this miscommunication. And that is what, when we think about sensory integration and sensory issues, that's what's really causing those things in the brain is because the hemispheres aren't communicating the way they're supposed to.
Wow.
And so we're actually doing things in our environment, and there's other factors that we can talk about that are actually causing this brain to get imbalanced. So God had this perfect design, and we're unknowingly causing this pattern to get off balance. And so, what are some of the symptoms we see? When you have functional disconnect syndrome, you have kiddos that have poor coordination. Those are
Mm.
those clumsy kiddos. They're falling out of their chairs. They're tripping over things. Speech delays. Of course, that's a big one. Social skills. That's a really big one. A lot of times there's allergies. They have eczema. Their immunity's poor. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on. Some of them have trouble with learning. So I'd like to kind of tell you a little bit about each hemisphere, if that's okay.
That would be great.
Yeah,
That's going
explain.
to be my next question about what are we actually supposed to be learning that's a right hemisphere versus left hemisphere? Because I'm not sure even I understand that.
Yes. Hold on. Okay. So the right side of our brain, which I said develops first,
Yeah.
I like to call this as the brake pedal part of our brain.
Okay.
And then the left side of our brain is our gas pedal part of the brain.
Okay.
So the right side develops this foundation and it's the bigger picture part of our brain. So it understands who I am, how I fit in the world, how I relate to others, how my body works, how I move. All of those big motor skills all are controlled by the right side of the brain. Our
Mm.
ability for impulse control. So as I'm talking, think about what we're seeing in the classroom and see the things that are missing. So that ability to stop and think and control ourselves, right brain also tries to control negative thinking. So if we're thinking negatively a lot, right brain is supposed to help control that. So if you imagine if it's weaker, it's not able to do that.
Right.
Your right side of the brain likes new things because, as a baby's brain is developing, the more stimulation, especially the right kind of stimulation, helps that brain grow. So when a baby's born, they're born in this flexion pattern, and the primitive centers of the brain is what is in control. And those first 2 years of life, we want them to get out of that flexion pattern, but we also want big body movements to develop because as they do that, those primitive reflexes start to integrate. As the primitive reflexes integrate, then the brain shifts from the primitive centers up to the frontal cortex to help lay that foundation for those executive functioning skills.
Yeah.
That's a big topic we talk about, but we're not providing what the kids need in order for their brains to develop that.
Yeah.
So let's shift to left side of the brain.
Yeah.
So left side of the brain is our gas pedal. So it notices patterns. So it's kind of our excitement, get up and go to learn patterns in our environment. And it's our center for verbal skills, learning communication, academics. It controls positive thinking. It really likes routines and patterns. So, what happens when you have this disconnect? So, a lot of our kiddos that have a right brain weakness. So, let's look at if you have a right brain weakness, meaning the right side of the brain, our brake pedal is weaker and our gas pedal is stronger, then you're going to have a child that can't sit still. They're focused on detail. So, those little ones that are constantly looking at car wheels and things like that, and they know all the characters of their favorite show, but they're having trouble communicating with their friends, right? They have a lot of poor balance, motor coordination. Those are the kids that are falling down all the time. A lot of times their speech delay because that foundation hasn't developed. Also, they lack eye contact a lot of times and they have poor social skills.
Mhm.
So, can you kind of see who we're
Mhm.
describing? Those kids on the spectrum are
Yep.
ADHD kids.
Yep.
Uh, and so, as that is supposed to develop around 18 to 24 months, if we don't get that foundation, that's why a lot of times people will say, my child was doing fine until 2 years old, right? And then all of a sudden you see they start losing skills. It's because when that right brain starts to shift to the left brain, starting to take its turn to develop, if it
Mhm.
doesn't have a good foundation, they lose that. And boys tend to have less of a bridge between the hemispheres. So they're more affected by this brain imbalance than girls. Uh,
Wow.
yeah. And then when I learned this, I was like, light bulbs. So
Absolutely.
explains so much. That's why I'm so passionate about getting this information out there. So the left brain, if the left brain is weaker, these are typically your shyer kids. These are your kids that typically get a diagnosis of learning disability. They're the ones that have more academic problems. Now, you can have symptoms of both because if there's a big extreme imbalance, then both hemispheres really aren't working the way God intended.
So it could be that you have a right brain that's underdeveloped, a left brain that's underdeveloped, and that this connection between the two hemispheres is not functioning appropriately. So much. I mean, I love talking about the brain. Anybody that listens to the podcast knows this. Anybody that my children know this. Like half the time when I'm talking to my adult sons, I'm saying, I just listened to this. I learned this about brain science. So I love learning about the brain. But talk to me a little bit about what's causing
It's a really good.
less right brain development. Well, like, why are we jumping over to the left brain? What are we doing? Like, what
Yeah.
factors are we seeing that are causing this underdevelopment?
There's a lot of factors. So, one of the biggest factors is stress in pregnancy, stress in early development. And that is not if any mama's watching, that's not to cause mama guilt. I had very high risk pregnancies. I was, stressed all the time. But we know that that is a risk factor. So, that's one of the things that, as knowing how the brain develops and how God designed us, we can help advocate for mamas who are
Mhm.
pregnant to
Yeah.
work on self-regulation and being able to manage that stress, and relying on God. God tells us not to be fearful and to rest, right? And that's
Right.
not a suggestion, it's a command because when we're able to rest and regulate, our body functions the way we need to. So
Yeah.
for caregivers, stress is a big thing too. We bring in our own things during the day. So, learning how to regulate, as I've learned as a mama, to regulate myself and work through the things that maybe I didn't develop as a kid, working on anxiety and things like that. My kids respond differently, right? So, that's a huge one. Stress is a big thing. But think about COVID and what happened now. All those COVID babies are 3, 5, 3 to 5 years old, right? And we're seeing a huge change and dysregulation. There's a lot more anxiety, social skills. So, COVID was this huge event that was really unknown and stressful for anybody, much less a pregnant mom or a mom with a little one, right? So, one of the reasons we're seeing such an increase, I believe, is because of the high stress. So, that's one factor. And then, of course, nutrition's a big one. Our food doesn't have the same quality of nutrition that it used to. A lot of sugar, food dyes, things like that. Kids aren't getting, their brains aren't getting what they need. And also, they're getting things that aren't good for their brain. Environmental things like plastics, they believe help changes the way the brain develops. Not all of those things we can control, but there are things in our environment that we're doing that we don't even think about. So, for example, I'll give you a couple little tips that you can think of is the right brain likes blues, purples, and greens are neutral. Greens target both sides of the brain. The left side of the brain likes reds, yellows, oranges. So think about our classrooms and what colors do we see a lot of? And toys and things like that.
Primary colors.
Primary colors,
You
right?
think about the toys that we have, they're all red and yellow.
Yes. And flashing lights, right?
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
in the newborn classes. And
Yeah.
so what's happening
Everything's
is
highly stimulating.
highly stimulating. And so that's triggering left brain activity. Think about nature. What do we see the colors in nature? A lot of greens,
Green, blue, and brown.
a lot of blue and brown, right?
Yeah.
And we see little spurts of reds, little
Yeah.
flowers of yellow, things like that, but just a little bit. One of the things is our classrooms are very overstimulating. Our homes are very overstimulating. Just the sense that we use. So your sweeter smells trigger left brain activity. Can you see why a lot of our kids can't sit
Yep.
still and we can't sit still? And we're so anxious all the time. So we have all these great floral candles and cleaners in our homes that's triggering left brain activity, the go, go, go. And so we're not getting as much balance of your stronger scents. So your stronger scents, lemons, peppermint, coffee, cedar, those all trigger your right side of the brain, which is our breakthrough. So in our classrooms alone, we've got a lot of stimulation. And then our academics, we're pushing academics. I mean, look at the baby toys alone, have ABCs on them. We know that for the first 24 months, they shouldn't even be thinking about patterns. They should be thinking about how I imitate and interact with people, how to move my body. So the lack of movement is one of the biggest things. So
Yeah.
babies are in carriers a lot. They're not getting moved. When we hold a baby and we drop something, we typically put the baby down and then go and grab something. But think about when they're in the womb, they're moving. If we go upside down, they're going upside down, right? And so we think that they're so fragile that we're putting them down, but they're not getting all that movement that they need to. Even when we start looking at books with kiddos that are babies,
Yeah.
everything is from left to right because that's how we read, and that's okay. But when we're doing left to right, all the stimulation is going to the left side of the brain because the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, the right side of the body. There's a couple craniofacial nerves that don't cross over, but for purposes.
Yeah.
And so we're doing a lot of left or right. We teach a lot of things of grabbing things with their right hand because we want them to get dominance. But really, in that first 2 years, they should be doing a lot with their left hand. They should be doing things with both hands together. So we tend to put a lot of things on their right side. We tend to go from left to right. So it's amazing that a lot of our kids that have autism and ADHD have a visual either neglect or delay to the left. Also, a lot of it's fascinating. The kids on the autism spectrum also will have a neglect looking at because we're focusing on fine motor too early and screens, they're here. And so they're not visually scanning, well, what is in their environment that's above them? Us, right?
That's fascinating.
Yeah. One of the first things I do with a child that has ADHD on the spectrum, if they have a visual neglect, we work on those visual skills of tracking objects up and looking at our faces because they're missing out on development of mirror neurons because they're not reading our faces. right?
Wow.
And they're not looking at our lips. So no wonder they're all getting speech delays, is because they're not looking up at us. So we've got to get kids off of fine motor and screens,
Mhm.
work on big body movement and looking up in their environment. And if we have kids looking to the right, we should also be looking to the left. So, does that make sense? God designed us as a whole body, but we're only looking and triggering development on certain parts. And
Mhm.
then we're not sure why kids are having trouble sitting still.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow, I think you've described so many challenges that I've heard early educators and program directors and things talk about over the last year or two, that it seems like kids are different. And what you're saying is they actually
They are.
are. They're
Mhm.
developing differently than maybe what we saw even a decade ago. And I do think what you said at the beginning of stress being a major factor, I do think what we're seeing right now in society in general is we have a whole generation of young parents that lives in a constant state of stress, of not enoughness. Myths. That's not a real word, probably, but
Yeah,
there's
you're right though.
so many young moms that I talk to right now feel immense pressure to do everything perfectly. And I think in that pressure, is where some of this is actually really happening incorrectly, is there's so much stress on doing everything perfectly that they're actually just missing the joy of being a mom.
And so they're not having that connection. And that connection is so important, especially in the first 2 years of life. But
Yeah.
if you think about, so this idea of self regulation is a newer term, right?
Yeah.
Regulating our emotions. But what we did have is we had outside play.
Right.
And so we were able to regulate, and our bodies were able to develop executive functioning skills on their own because of our environment. We were in an environment that was more natural, more as God designed. We were able to move and play and problem solve and have free play and use our imaginations. And so this generation, I have a 23-year-old and I've seen it with her with all of the screen time and things like that. Not only did they get a lot of screen time, which we know triggers left side of the brain and overstimulates the brain, but
Yeah.
they didn't get the development of some of those executive functioning centers in the brain because they weren't out playing, so they got a double whammy. And now they're having kids. And as you
Right.
and I know, having kids is hard. So now there is, and part of the pressure is because knowing how to manage, yes, we want to do things perfectly, but knowing how to manage our stress levels. So I'm having to learn how to rewire my brain in
Right.
order to do those things. So I think that's what you're seeing is not only you had a generation that was struggling before and
Yeah.
had a lot of anxiety, but now they're having kids, which is affecting their kids. And so we're really at a crisis, I think.
Yeah.
And what is God has really put on my heart is that we can intervene and we can get this information out and we can say, Mama, you know what? Yes, having the perfect birthday party for pictures is nice, but what your child really needs is a regulated you
Yeah.
and for you to regulate and for you to be happy and joy and think about how much of a gift they are so that you don't miss it. Cause I wish I would have been able to do that. And
Yeah.
they're going to have a deeper connection. They're going to learn to rewire their brains. And then their kids are going to start doing better. So, what you are doing is helping change. And hopefully, we're trying to interrupt this cycle because it's just going to get worse, right? These
Sure.
kids that are growing up, if they continue in the patterns of their brain not getting what they need, are going to be parents in 20 years, right? So
Right.
what we're doing right now is really important and helpful.
Yeah. So give us some practical ways that in our early childhood programs we could help. What can we do?
So knowing that the first 2 years, what the brain really likes and triggering that, but also with our 2 to 4 year olds or 5 to 6, even us as adults, looking at that left with the right side that brake pedal needs and trying to introduce more activities related to that. because we know with neuroplasticity, the brain is an amazing thing, right? And so if we trigger right brain activity, so the great thing about this theory is not to scare anyone. It's to say, okay, this is how God designed it. Let our brains, let's honor it. So what are some things that we can do? We know that the right side of the brain really likes big picture thinking. So when a child drops something on the floor, instead of focusing on what's broken, the bigger picture is it's not really a big deal and everyone's okay.
Yeah.
So the simple moments of that, what's the bigger picture here? Holding off on academics and
Mm.
and working on imitation skills, how my body works, how I relate to others. One of the things I love to work on with kids is stop and start activities. I know we do freeze dance a lot in the classrooms, but when we're walking down the hall, I love to do the let's walk like a sloth. And we're walking as slow as we can because we're controlling emotions, and then we're going to freeze. And then we're going to go fast, and then we're going to freeze. So that start stop triggers right brain activity to help with that impulse control.
Love it.
Working on working memory. Where do things go? If I hide something under two buckets, where did I hide it? Playing memory games, things like that. Because when we build that memory part, that's a higher level skill, then we can remember what the instructions are. I love breathing. So lots of breathing things. We have a really cool animation, 4 of them, but breathing, lots of looking up. So in the classrooms, looking at the classrooms and looking where all the manipulatives are and things like that. And I remember even in my kindergarten class, them having banners of the ABCs up high. So having things up when we're playing with kids, having them look up. So if if a teacher is about to hand a toy to a child, instead of directly handing it to them, their hand, have the toy up and have them follow so they can see your face. I mean, it's simple things like that. Like I said, we're doing a lot of reading from left to right, but can we roll balls from, the right side of the table to the left? Can we do our cars from right to left? So we need to do a lot of playing with our left hand. So when we're doing hand painting, y'all like to do a lot of hand paintings. Parents love those. Instead of doing the right hand, paint the left hand because that stimulation is going to stimulate the right brain. Paint the left foot instead. So simple things that don't seem like it's going to do anything, but think about how much we focus on our right side of our bodies because a lot of us are right-handed. We need to start focusing on the left side of their body too. So those are simple things. I had a few more for you. Big body play.
Yeah.
Big body
Yeah.
play, and lots of
That's what I was gonna say. It's okay if they want to roll around. It's actually really good for them.
it's really, really good for them, And then another thing is just looking at behavior is a communication. So if a child is having a lot of behavior, we want to focus on how we stop the behavior, and we need to look at what it's teaching us. And so a lot of times it's saying that child, maybe they're hungry. Maybe they need more protein snacks. Maybe they need sips of water. Do they need more activity? Do they need calming colors? What is that teaching us instead of trying to get them to stop? Because the brain is telling you what they need. And if they're, can't sit still, it's because the brain's not getting that right side of the brain stimulation.
Goodness, I feel like what you've said is so many things I think many of us know. I just didn't know there was research to support it.
Yeah.
I mean, even I think we knew stressed out moms and dads have an impact, but what's the impact? And then I think when you just think through some of those things, like I see, and listen, no shade on parents here, but they're handing their phone every time they go out. So
Yep.
not only is it the screen time that's extra stimulating, but you're always looking down instead of looking up. Like there's such a mixture of how it's affecting your body
Yes.
and your posture and then brain development and visual, like even your eyesight and all that. Just seeing studies coming out of kids are more nearsighted earlier because
Yes.
they're spending more time close up rather than looking at things out. So much is just interconnected. And I think what you're saying is if we just spend more time doing the big body things, like let's not make
preschool as much school, like many of us
Yes.
think it's school, right?
Yes.
Like they're not
Right.
meant to just sit and do a worksheet, again, looking down at a table,
No.
focusing on writing skills or any of that, but more looking at what are the big things that we could do? Can we take them outside and allow them to climb and do all those kinds of big body development things? Can we let them roll around in the classroom? Do they have to sit crisscross applesauce every time we're sitting down?
Right. Yes.
Really think, and as educators, like, hear me. Some of this may feel like your classroom's getting out of control, and I want you to take a deep breath
Yes.
and just recognize that it's actually closer to God's design when children are able to move freely than if we're trying to control all of their movement. And that doesn't mean we let chaos run wild. That's not
Right.
at all what we're saying, but a little bit more big movement rather than contained. And that's from birth on. I see a lot of young children also, like, they, especially that 0 to 2, like, they're spending most of their time in a container. Like, I
Yeah.
heard somebody call them container babies
They,
because
they yes, container babies, and it
they're
really
either in
doesn't.
a carrier or they're in a jumper or in an exerciser or some place where they're just confined rather than able to move freely. And I think we just need to remember there's so much benefit to how God has designed us, that we are not meant to be containerized. We're meant to be free. And,
Much.
ways that we can support that, right? Like how I love that you're giving us really practical ways that we can just support that open development. And again, no guilt here. This is not about guilt. It really is about knowing so that we can do things differently. If we don't know, we can't change things. But once we know, we can change things. Good.
Absolutely.
I
And
love
one
it.
of the things I wanted to add, if we still have time, was, there was a study at Harvard a long time ago, I think in the early 2000s, that talked about a program. They did a study and they looked at two classrooms. In one of the classrooms, they were focused on academics. The other classroom, they were focused on self-regulation skills. Well, a lot of these things were big body movements, working on body awareness, things like songs, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, things like that. Working memory, imitation play, all that stuff. In the classroom that focused on that, the behaviors went down a lot. And later on, they were more prepared to learn. So it's not that we're going backwards. I know as parents, there's a lot of pressure for parents. When a child goes into kindergarten, they're expected to be ready to read and write. But if we focus on what the brain needs and allow them to be able to have what they need to control their body and think logically, then that learning's going to come naturally. But we're trying to put the learning before the parts are there, right? We don't have all the skills needed in order to learn. So imitation skills, you asked some things that you can do just by imitating lots of animal sounds. And we're talking about big animation. We want to be silly, right? Because that disarms the fear and the negativity. Being positive is one of the best things that we can do because that's going to regulate ourselves, but that's going to trigger right brain activity. But lots of imitation and that body awareness play, doing lots of songs. Upside down is one of the things that if teachers can do, upside down play. So bending over to get things, head and shoulders, knees and toes, and bending down. That upside down play, rolling, helps with the vestibular system, but it gets oxygen to the brain.
Yeah.
So those are all fun things that we can do.
Really easy and silly things, y'all. This isn't extra work. It's actually easier and more fun work, which is
More
part
fun
of
work.
and why so many of us have chosen this early childhood field is because it should be less serious and more fun. And yet at the same time, it has become really stressful and really serious. And there does seem to have, like, we've added a lot of pressure to what used to just be really fun. And so I love what you're saying is if we just went back to the things that kids already naturally do, they love to hang upside down. They love to climb and run and roll and sing fun songs that include big body movement. Those are the things kids already love anyway. And it makes our days a whole lot easier too. So I say we go back to the basic things that we know kids need and love, and then just pay attention to some of those things. Are you having parts of your day where kids are looking up more than they're just looking straight ahead or down? Are
Mhm.
there places where kids have an opportunity to spin in circles? I think that's another really great thing for kids to do is spinning and bending over. I hadn't even thought about that as a fun thing, but I love that. So these easy things, Kendra. These are not hard things to shift.
No, there's not, and every little bit really helps make a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think we underestimate that too, is that these small changes actually make big changes in our brains.
Yeah.
Small changes in the outward make big changes in our brain, and that's worth it. It's worth
Yeah.
it.
I saw a study the other day, someone was telling me about just for even adults, that just by writing 3 things, UCLA and then Robert Edmonds came out with this several studies about just thinking positive and writing 3 things, daily for 6 weeks. That's it, just 6 weeks. 3 things that you're grateful for
Yeah.
helped rewire the participant's brain, and they measured that by an overall sense of less anxiety, more happiness, and actually cortisol changes. So just by writing 3 things a day that they're grateful for, what if we brought that into the classroom?
Love.
Just we start talking to our kids about the positivity. With my daughter, has a lot of medical stuff, and we used to appointments would be so hard for us, and we started looking at the positive. Maybe if we had to go into the hospital, it was by her favorite cupcake place because we live
Yeah.
really far out? So we just started to look at, and what I noticed is, or I'm like, "Oh, wow, at least we didn't have to wait that long today." What I noticed is it was contagious. And
Mhm.
so instead of
Yeah.
focusing on this day really is hard and everything is not fun, mom, she started focusing on, and I started seeing her use the same language. At least this happened, and I'm grateful for this.
Yeah.
And it made our time together much differently. So, what if we just start taking that 6-week challenge of writing 3 things, getting our parents to start writing 3 things that they're grateful for, and start rewiring our brains? What is that going to do for the kids in our care? Right.
Love that challenge. That's a
Yeah.
great challenge. I mean, that to me is so much of what we've talked about today is so biblical, and even this last thing, like I just was thinking this morning, it actually was in part of my Bible reading this morning was like, am I thinking about whatever is good, whatever is noble, that Philippians 4,
Mhm.
maybe verse 8, something like that,
Mhm.
about think about anything that's excellent or praiseworthy. Think about those things. And our natural tendency often is to not be positive. It's to find the things to complain about. It's the natural place that my brain goes, and I have to fight against that. And what a great way for us to help kids start wiring their brains earlier to
That's
move
the
that direction.
Yeah, God says to rejoice in everything,
Yeah.
and everything give thanks. So, that's a simple thing that anyone who's listening to this can do that, and their classroom is going to be transformed just because
Yeah.
they're gonna regulate and they're gonna start seeing the little things as fun and not the hard thing.
Yeah. So to wrap up this episode, final question I like to ask our guests is our podcast is called Reimagine Childhood. I would love to hear from you. If you could reimagine one thing about our current approach to early childhood, what would that be and why?
So, it would be focused on the bigger picture
Yeah.
and not the fine details. If we could not worry about what they're going to be as an adult or preparing them for entering school, we get
Mhm.
so caught up, even as parents, we get so
Yeah.
caught up in I have all this that I have to instill in this, and there's so much pressure that we put on
Mhm.
ourselves that we've got to teach them not to hit, and we've gotta do all these things, and if we just look at the bigger picture, that every single connection and just having fun, their brains are going to learn and stack, and they're gonna learn it on our own, but we're trying to teach them things that if we just work on connection and giving them what their bodies need naturally, God
Yeah.
designed it that they're gonna get there where we want. We don't have to put that much pressure on ourselves.
Oh, Kendra, so good. I love that. If we can focus on the things that really make childhood fun, the rest will come. And
Well,
I love that God's designed them that way and designed us
yeah,
that way.
yeah,
That if we
yeah,
can focus on the things that are fun, the rest will come.
Yes.
The rest will come, and we don't need to push it. We don't need to force it. We just need to be silly along with them and enjoy them.
Enjoy them, because when we're stressed, our brain's not thinking logically. And
Mm,
so we're not able to say the things that we want and not say the things we don't want to say, right? And then
yeah.
we're going to have regrets. But when we just focus on today, what are we doing? We're learning how to just have fun and relate and give them what they need, then it's a good day.
Perfect. I love it. Thanks, Kendra, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Monica, for having me.
Wow. So much information today. We're seeing such an increase in developmental delays, sensory integration issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I hear it from so many of you. But it also sounds like there are really practical ways that we can support young children and their families in proper, balanced brain development so that maybe we could reduce some of these delays and other issues that we see. I definitely felt the weight of helping young moms and dads to recognize how their own stress and anxiety levels adversely affect the brain development of their children. There are not easy answers to that, but I do think as Christian programs, there are ways that we can support moms and dads in getting the community that will help them, and also sometimes just providing some easy ideas for moms and dads to reduce stress. I love some of the simple ideas Kendra mentions for the classroom. Things like lots of big body movement for all the ages, things like climbing and rolling and crawling and jumping, encouraging an upward gaze for children. That was new to me. Encouraging kids to look up at the ceiling and up at you. Offering items on the left side of the body. That's opposite of what most of us do. So we can build the right brain. And then easy things like stop and start games, red light, green light, or freeze dance, and other activities similar to that. What is one way that you can manage your own stress and anxiety levels this week? Maybe it's as simple as pausing outside your classroom door for a deep breath every time you step inside. Maybe it's adding in a practice of sharing one thing you're grateful for and doing it with your students so you can start building that habit within them. And then what's one way you could sing head, shoulders, knees, and toes today with all the body movements, especially with the upside down movement when kids touch their toes rather than squatting to touch their toes. Kendra has done so much research, and she's actually developed an app called the Tantrum Tamer. She has tons of free resources with ideas on how to help support children's proper development on her website as well at skidamarink.kids.com. Both of these are linked in the show notes for you. Just know that the little bit of work you do to help children build their big muscle skills, to develop a positive attitude, to recognize that there's a big picture, actually goes a long, long way in helping their brains develop in a healthy, appropriate way, the way God designed. Keep at it. You're doing a great job.
Thanks for spending time with us today on Reimagine Childhood. We hope you walk away with a fresh idea, a little encouragement, and a big reminder that your work with young children truly changes lives. If this episode was helpful, would you take a moment to subscribe? Rate the show in whichever app you listen, and then share this episode with someone who might benefit. Your engagement helps us reach more teachers and caregivers who are shaping the next generation for Jesus. Stay connected with us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, and our website at early.com. Until next time, keep nurturing wonder, faith, and joy in the children God has placed in your care.